into it. Yeah.
Perfect. Then, without further ado, let's hop into our first set of questions and answers. So, we're going to be focusing now on the topic of exploring different strategies that can help us manage stress, overcome workplace anxiety, build resilience in general, and have a really healthy and productive work environment. So, we'll just be discussing practical approaches which can help us with our mental health and resilience in professional settings. So I just want to open up the floor to anyone who might have some questions on this topic or wants to share some experiences and get some insights on it. Would anyone like to ask a question? I can go ahead and start off and oh, Tadiwa, you can go ahead if you would like to say something. Okay. So I'll go ahead and ask, what are some effective strategies for managing stress in high pressure work environments?
Okay. So, first of all, that's a really good question because I think a lot of people will be in highly stressful work environments and not notice until it's really late in the game, right? So I think one of the key things to look out for is you asked what to look out for, or okay.
Maybe some strategies or what to look out for.
Okay. So first it's important to know what to look out for, right? So one of the things to look out for is how you're feeling after your workday, right? So if you're feeling completely drained more than normal, right? That's something to look out for. And that's one of the things to really pay attention to for a period of time, right? Because it's normal to have a stressful work environment here and there, right? But when it's constant, then you'll notice that you're constantly feeling some type of way after your workday, right? So that's one of the things to look out for. And the strategies that you can put in place are vast. Okay. So one of the things that I always tell my clients is to have a work-life balance, right? So when you have a work-life balance, then you're able to have a space to decompress after your workday. But when your life is your work and your work is your life, that's harder, right? You are even forming your identity around your work, and that's really harmful. So one of the things to put in place is a work-life balance, right? And then in this work-life balance, you understand what it is that helps you feel like you are decompressing at the end of the day, right? So decompressing is different for different people, right? So when you go home, what does that look like, right? Are you going home and then you are, sorry about that. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Issue today with electricity today of all days. Please.
Oh, it
Okay.
happens.
Yeah. So, what was I saying? So when you have your decompressing time, you have to understand what that looks like for you. So you're not going home and numbing yourself. Numbing yourself is like going home and taking 50 shots, right? Taking 50 shots just to go to sleep, right? So you go home, have a self-soothing technique, right? So for a lot of people, you get home, you take a few minutes to maybe scroll on TikTok, right? That's okay. Scroll on TikTok for like a few minutes and then, decide what you want to cook, romanticize that, right? Get into the kitchen, maybe pour yourself a glass of wine, right? Um, get into the kitchen, cook, then have a nice long shower, right? have your meal, watch a show, right? So that's like a self-soothing technique after you're done with work. Okay. So that's one of the best strategies that you can put in place, because the other ones are really on ground, right? So while you're at work, how can you self-soothe yourself when you're feeling like you're super overwhelmed, right? So one of the things I tell my clients, mindfulness. Mindfulness is important, right? So are you going to work dreading it, or are you going to work knowing that you can handle it no matter how overwhelmed you feel, right? So when you incorporate mindfulness, it gives you confidence, right? And confidence is so important when you're in a highly stressful work environment. It's so important to feel like you can handle it, right? And it's also important to feel like if you can't handle it, then you have systems that you've put in place to handle it. So one of the best things that you can put in place in terms of systems is like mindfulness. So mindfulness looks like breathing techniques, right? My favorite breathing technique is the 4-4-4 system. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, right? So breathing techniques, crying in the bathroom, that's allowed, right? If you feel like you need to go to the bathroom real quick just to shed a few tears, that's fine. Go in there, shed a few tears, come out feeling empowered, come out feeling like you've offloaded, right? So breathing is really helpful. Offloading is really helpful. Okay. I always tell my clients, don't be so eager to look like you're the one who's the most productive. So go for lunch if it's lunchtime, right? If it's lunchtime, go for lunch. Have boundaries around how long you're working and when it's time to stop working, right? So have a strict routine about when it's time to shut your laptop down, right? So having boundaries with yourself is so important. Okay. You have to have boundaries with yourself. Allow yourself to know that your work isn't going to be your life, right? And when you know that, then you're able to have boundaries with yourself. Okay. So mindfulness, boundaries, okay, and offloading, right? Offloading can be in very many ways. Crying, it can be offloading to your employees, it can be therapy. I mean, to your coworkers, it can also be therapy, okay? Or whatever systems you can put in place to help you offload would be very, very helpful. Yeah.
Perfect. I love what you said about, boundaries and learning how to separate your identity from work because, we sometimes get sucked into that. Um, and yeah, that's speaks to me a lot. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's someone has a question. Yes, yeah, go for it. Okay.
I also had a question around, are we still asking questions? Am I allowed to ask a question? Okay. So how do you deal with the anxiety of, or how do you determine between when you are just high stress at work and you probably need to develop other systems outside of work to make sure you're balancing out your work life, and it's really just an environment that it's not a good work environment, it's not a healthy work environment, and it's not an environment you should be in any longer? And if so, how do you deal with the anxiety of maybe needing to leave that workplace without a backup, or the transition outside of the workplace without a backup, if that is a high stress environment that you might have to leave?
Okay, that's a really good question. So sometimes in the beginning, it's not easy to differentiate, right? Sometimes it's not easy to know, is it me or is it this place? Okay. So your own nervous system will give you feedback, right? So what you notice after your workday is so important to note down. If you're constantly feeling drained, then you say, okay, I feel drained every time after work. I feel anxious every time I'm at work. So let me incorporate systems and then see how that works for me over time. If you're incorporating these systems and you feel like over time you feel better, but your environment doesn't, then the environment is the problem. If you incorporate these systems and you feel like nothing is changing at all, right, then maybe it's you and the environment, or you're reacting to the environment, right? I hope that makes sense. So it's hard to differentiate in the beginning, right? But we can't also say that you can create these systems and then it works, but then it means now you can still stay in an environment that feels toxic just because you feel like you can handle it, right? Sometimes it's important to know how long am I going to stay in a toxic work environment until I feel like I can leave, right? So first, you incorporate these systems that will help you feel better, right? Incorporate them, see how you feel over a period of time. Give yourself time, right? Give yourself like 3, 4, 6 months, right? Give yourself time, and then see if the environment is the problem or you're the problem. Because if the environment is not a problem, then once you put in the systems, you feel better over time, right? But if the environment is a problem, then you will notice that, right? Once you notice the environment is a problem, decipher what is it about the environment, right? What is it about this environment that's not working for me, right? So sometimes it's that the place is toxic, right? Sometimes it's that you feel like you are not aligned, right? Sometimes you feel like this place is not aligning with me, right? So decipher, is it that this place is not aligning? Is it that this place is just really super toxic, right? For both case scenarios, it means you can't stay there for long, right? So you let yourself understand, okay, so if it's just that it's not aligning, is there a way that I can sit here and learn something new that might help me, like in another place if I decide to leave, right? So you ask yourself, okay, am I willing to stay here long enough to learn something? And then whilst I'm learning, I'm looking for other places, right? I'm looking for another place to go. Okay. So once you learn that it's not aligning, then you decide, what am I willing to do with that information, right? Now, if it's a place that is just toxic, right? You also need to decide, okay, this is a toxic work environment, right? What is toxic about it? Is it my boss? Is it the entire culture, right? Is it just a few people, like colleagues, right? What is it about the environment that is making it toxic, right? So once you know, you pinpoint exactly what it is, then you're able to put in systems that will help you understand how to deal with that specific thing that is making it toxic, right? Sometimes the work environment itself is toxic because of the boss, right? It's toxic because of the culture, right? The culture doesn't really create an environment that makes employees feel safe, right? So when you notice that it's the boss, right? So you can differentiate. Maybe it's the boss, it's not really the culture. Maybe it's just the boss. So you look at this person as the reason why it's toxic, right? So don't generalize, right? So when you notice maybe it's this person that's making it toxic, then you're able to handle that in a different way, right? And then when you differentiate in your brain is able to understand that, okay, I can go to work, right? It's the culture that the culture makes me feel safe, right? But the boss doesn't make me feel safe. So I know how to handle that. But I can still go to work because the culture feels safe, right? But when it's the culture, the boss, like everything is just toxic, then you know, okay, this place is toxic. I need to figure out if I'm going to stay long enough to look for something else, or if I don't feel like I can stay here at all, then you just leave, right? I think a lot of times leaving a workplace can feel daunting when you don't have anything else to fall back on. And sometimes I tell my clients, you have to be okay with that, because it's like you have to pick a struggle. Am I willing to keep waking up to go to this place that feels like it's draining me? Or am I willing to leave immediately and be okay with not having anything to fall back on, right? But when you notice that you're not feeling okay because of the work environment, that's when to really build an emergency fund, right? Build a fund that will help you sustain your lifestyle whilst you're looking for a job if you decide to leave without a backup plan. Your backup plan can be your emergency fund. Okay. So that's just some of the things that I would tell someone who's in that position.
Thank you, Mumbi.
We have a question from Tadiwa that she wrote in the chat, and I'll read it out because her mic isn't working. So she says, I was just curious about how self-employment/freelancing can impact mental health, especially since freelancers tend to wear multiple hats in their work.
I love that question, especially because I'm self-employed. Self-employment is a whole different beast, I would say. With employment, you have certain safety nets, right? Safety nets like you have a salary at the end of the month, right? A safety net like you can take leave days and all these things, right? You have a structure put in place that helps you run your day-to-day as an employee. But when you're self-employed, you have to do these things by yourself, right? So you're the accountant, you're the personal assistant, you're the one running your finances, you're the one doing the marketing. Everything is up to you, especially in the beginning years, right? So your mental health is going to take a hit. I think it would be naive to say you will go into it and never have any mental health issues. Accept that your mental health will take a hit, and that's okay. That's okay, because when your mental health takes a hit, then you're able to know what systems you need to put in place. Otherwise, you would never know, right? So when you are noticing, okay, this one thing makes me feel drained, maybe admin work makes me feel drained. Personally, admin work, not for me. Okay. So I put systems in place to help me with the admin work, right? So just know that your mental health will take a hit. Okay. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you need to pay attention to what is draining you and then put systems in place, right? Sometimes you can't afford to hire people left, right, and center, right? So you figure out what it is you can afford, first of all, right? Then, if there are certain things you can't afford, look into technology. Technology plays a big role when you're self-employed, right? So you don't need to necessarily plan everything every day, right? You can have a software that helps you plan your day. You can have software that helps you plan out like every single key detail, right? And then you rely on these systems, right? So your mental health will take a hit, but it's just data that is your mind is giving you about what it is you need to let go of, what it is you need to put in place, right? And yeah, allow yourself to go on that journey, right? I know people don't say that, being self-employed can be very tiresome. People don't really shout on the rooftops about how draining self-employment can be, right? People don't really talk about that. I think a lot of times entrepreneurship is glamorized, right? But the truth of the matter is, at the back end of everything, you're the one who's handling every single thing, right? So when it's that way, you have to understand that you should be willing, you should be willing to allow yourself to put in those systems however much they cost, right? However much they cost, you have to allow yourself to put in those systems, right? And then build on that over time. Okay. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Does anyone have any more questions on this topic before I move to the next?
I have one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to talk a little bit about especially people who are coming into being employed for the first time. There's a lot of anxiety, not necessarily about being in the workplace, but about being confident enough to do your job, essentially, because it's a whole like studying and doing the actual job is very different. So, what do you recommend when someone is just starting a job? Like, what strategies can they put in place to feel a little bit more confident about starting this new job?
Yeah, yeah. It's very normal to feel intimidated, right? It's very normal because this is now a new place you're in, right? And it's like people are looking at you. You feel like their eyes are on you to see if you are capable, right? So it's a normal feeling. So remember that. Remember that it's a very normal feeling to feel intimidated. It's normal to feel anxious, right? It doesn't mean that you're not good at your job, right? It just means that you're in a new place. It just means that you're in a space of newness, right? And newness can feel intimidating. It doesn't speak to your qualifications, it just speaks to your environment, right? And so once you understand that, you can put in place affirmations. I think affirmations are so important in building confidence because it's you telling yourself what you need to hear about how you're feeling, right? Based on proof, right? So you have managed to get this job, okay? Remind yourself that they picked you because of your qualifications. They didn't pick you because they're doing you a favor, right? They picked you because of your qualifications. So remind yourself that. Whatever you need to hear, remind yourself that, right? Affirmations play a big role because affirmations are you speaking to yourself, right? So affirmations play a big, big role in confidence, okay? And then you look at what it is that feels hard, right? Whatever feels hard, work on that, right? Research, ask for help, right? Speak to your colleagues, right? Um, Offload to the people around you. Tell them how you're feeling, right? At home, not necessarily at work, because you never know who you can trust in the beginning, right? At home, talk about your experience, right? Talk about it to your friends, right? Talk about how you're feeling, right? And then let them point to you, right? Allow that. Allow people to pour into you and remind you of why you are where you are, and believe them, okay? Because sometimes it's hard to believe yourself, right? But believe it when people are telling you that you're here for a reason, they employed you for a reason, right? Believe them, okay? So that also might play into your affirmation, okay? And then when you notice that something is difficult, ask for help as many times as you need to ask for help, right? As many times as you need. Don't be scared to ask for help because that's how you learn, right? And then allow yourself to not let that work environment consume you, or the newness of everything that is going on consume you. Don't let it consume you, right? Be be strict about having your weekends off, right? Having those boundaries, right? Don't let it be that now because you're so anxious to prove yourself, you're not letting yourself rest, right? You have to remind yourself that you're grateful, right? You're grateful to have this job, but you're not gonna kill yourself for the job, right? You're not gonna come and kill yourself just to keep the job, right? Remind yourself that you're capable, that you can rest, and you don't need to earn that rest, right? You can rest and allow yourself to rest, right? And then every Sunday, right, before the work week begins, do some self-soothing techniques, right? Remind yourself why it is you're here, right? Remind yourself how capable you are. Remind yourself that you can do hard things, right? Remind yourself that whatever comes, you will handle it, right? Take a nice long shower, journal about your work week, talk to yourself through your journal, right? Um, get enough sleep, okay? And then wake up the next day and repeat. Remind yourself, right? If you're feeling anxious, talk to yourself, okay? And then go into the workplace. Masking confidence. If you don't feel confident, sometimes it's okay to fake it till you make it, right? You don't need to show people that you're not confident. Go in there, fake the confidence until it's oozing off of you, right? And remember that you can ask questions, you can ask for help, and you can talk to the people around you. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So then, without any further questions, I'll move to the next topic. And in this topic, we're going to talk about how to navigate high pressure environments without compromising your health. As we mentioned earlier, keeping that balance and self-awareness, which is really effective in stress management. So we're just going to be exploring different strategies to help maintain performance, reduce burnout, and prioritize mental and physical health during demanding situations. So maybe someone has some questions to ask regarding dealing with high pressure environments. I think that many of us have been in a situation where we've stretched ourselves too thin, and sometimes it has an impact on our mental or even physical health. So I just want to open up the floor to people who may want to ask a question. I can start and then I'll give you guys the floor. So my first question is, what are the risks of continuously working in a high pressure environment, and how can they be mitigated?
That's a good question. Okay, so the risks are there and they only affect you when you're not putting in the systems, right? And they only affect you majorly when you're not putting in the systems, right? Sometimes you can surprise yourself. You can go in there, put in the systems, and then realize, oh, I can actually handle it, right? But when you're not putting in the systems and you're just allowing yourself to be, to be tossed and turned here and there, then it's going to affect you, right? So you first start by putting in the systems, okay? Then you allow yourself to notice that sometimes it's also okay to accept that this is a stressful environment. Accept that, okay? I think sometimes when you don't accept things and then you're coming from a place of denial, it's harder to navigate, right? Sometimes when you just accept, okay, I work in a highly stressful environment, that's fine. I'm here, so what can I do? Right? So you asked?
How we can work to mitigate some of those risks that come from working in a high pressure environment.
Again, it goes back to systems, right? Understanding what works for you. Okay. Sometimes I also have seen that you'll notice that when you go in and then, you've done everything you can do, right? But then you still don't feel like this is the place for you. Sometimes the answer is not quitting. Sometimes the answer is looking at a different department, right? Maybe a different department would work for you, okay? If the job description is still something that you can do, right? Try shifting your department. I've seen that work for so many people. because sometimes you go into a workplace and, yes, you can do the job, but you notice that you're just not happy. You're constantly drained. You're constantly anxious. Maybe even you're having panic attacks. You can do the job, but barely. At what cost? So yes, you can do the job, but you don't feel like you're yourself anymore, right? Sometimes the answer is not to quit. Sometimes the answer is to shift to a different department. If that's an option, try that first. Okay. So it goes back to putting in the systems, right? Putting in the systems, asking for help is so important. If you have an in-house therapist, utilize that. Utilize that. Okay. Allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to go see a therapist. Okay. If you don't have one at work, find one outside of work, right? And then take your leave days. Take your leave days seriously. I always tell my clients, if you die today, they will replace you. They won't mourn you for years. They'll replace you immediately. So take your leave days. Take your leave days. If your workplace allows for mental health days, take them. Um, utilize rest as much as you can. Okay. And don't feel like you need to earn the rest. Allow yourself to rest. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I believe that rest isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. So we need to treat it as such. Just on this point of boundaries that you had made earlier, I wonder, how can professionals set boundaries that protect their mental health, but without risking the potential of career growth?
Okay. I mean, having boundaries shouldn't mean that you're risking your growth, right? Having boundaries should not mean that you're letting yourself off easy. Having boundaries should not make you avoidant. Boundaries are supposed to help you work better, right? Boundaries are supposed to help you be productive, right? So your boundaries are not supposed to make you feel like you are being let off easy, or like you don't want to work. Your boundaries are supposed to help you understand that you can work and still remain dignified. You can still keep your dignity even whilst you're working, right? You don't need to sell your soul just so that you can keep your job, right? So boundaries are important, okay? And boundaries at work look like saying no, right? Saying no after work hours, right? If your job description says these are the working hours, stick to that. Okay, maybe you can have leeway for like an hour or two, right? But it shouldn't be eating into your resting time, right? So allow yourself to say no. Okay. And notice I keep saying allow yourself, because a lot of times the things that hold us back is the fact that we're not giving ourselves the permission to stand up for ourselves, right? So you allow yourself to say no. Okay. Even when you're shaking in your boots, even when you feel like you feel guilty, right? In fact, one of the things we tell our clients about boundaries is expect that you might feel guilty. Expect that you might feel like maybe you did the wrong thing. Expect that. Doesn't mean that you made the wrong decision. It just means that you're doing something out of your comfort zone, right? So, saying no is important, right? Having a specific goal for yourself, right? So know why you're there, even for yourself. Yes, you have a job description, but understand, why am I here? What do I want to gain out of this? And when you set your parameters around that, then you also have confidence to show up, right? Because you have a goal as to why you're there, right? So that's just some of the things that I would say.
Yeah, I love your point about understanding that we do have choices, because I think it's easy to slip into that mentality of because you're employed, you kind of have to do everything that you're told. But we do have choices. And sometimes we really need to exercise that.
Mm.
Um, is there anyone that would like to raise a question on this point?
How does I guess someone who's very productive, enjoys doing stuff, like help themselves in terms of like figuring out this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. Just speaking for myself because that's how I am.
Mm. Okay, your body keeps a score, right? Your body keeps a score. Your body never lies, right? There's some things that you feel like you can do effortlessly, and then there's some things that feel like it feels like work, you know? The things that you feel like you can do effortlessly or you don't need too much effort, that's maybe something to take note of and keep doing. The things that you feel like are requiring you to even tap into a place that feels unnatural for you, right? That's something to take a note of. Sometimes you need to do that for growth, right? But then sometimes you notice that you keep doing that, but all it does is make you feel drained. So you need to know the difference. Sometimes you'll notice that, oh, the more I do this, the more I feel like I'm growing, right? But then sometimes you feel like the more I do this, the more I feel like I'm compromising myself. I'm compromising my sanity. I'm compromising my dignity, right? So you notice there's a difference, right? There's a difference between when you betray yourself versus actually doing something for growth, like something is making you feel like you're growing, right? Notice the difference. And if it's making you betray yourself, that's something to reconsider. Yeah.
Thank you. I agree with that. I understand. Thank you.
Okay, then if there aren't any further questions, I'll move to the next section. So here we're going to talk about burnout. We've all heard the term. It's become more popular over the recent years, as most mental health terms have become. And I really want to get into how to avoid burnout, because it's a really serious issue.
Mhm.
And it's very hard to get your energy back once you've experienced it. It touches on the topic of setting boundaries. So I think that that is a pretty good introduction.
Mm.
Um, but also about how to create habits that support a healthy lifestyle. So, does anyone want to ask any questions or share any experiences about burnout, or just feeling like maybe they're on the brink of it, how to prevent it, how to identify it?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So not necessarily burnout in terms of maybe like too much focus on work, but for those of us or anyone else who does work in sectors where you are maybe involved with vulnerable communities or marginalized communities, and the work that you do is can be taxing on your mental state, and in some ways that can get you burnt out. How do you prevent that, or how do you cope with that, because it's work that you enjoy doing, but does take a toll on your mental health? So how do you prevent burnout in those situations, or how do you cope with it in those situations?
Mm. Okay. I think I have to mention that sometimes it's hard to prevent burnout depending on the nature of your work. If you're in an environment that needs a lot from you, sometimes it can be hard to prevent burnout. So, okay, burnout has become like a buzzword, right? But what we don't say often is that your relationship with burnout is important, right? You have to understand your relationship with burnout depending on the place that you work, right? So if you work in a place that requires a lot from you, that takes a lot from you, especially in that environment that you've described, sometimes it can be hard to prevent the burnout. So rewire your relationship with burnout. You'll notice that sometimes, maybe you'll notice sometimes towards the end of the year, I feel really tired because the nature of my work drains me a lot, right? So accept that, right? And then put in systems towards the end of the year. So maybe towards at the end of the year, you're resting more, right? You are taking more leave days, right? You are um, allowing yourself to lean more on leisure than work, right? So you allow yourself to understand that burnout happens, okay? And I can rewire my relationship with burnout, right? Now, how to put in the systems is also important, okay? So when so you can try different things, right? You can try different things like mindfulness, like exercise, right? And then in places that feel like they require a lot out of you, you have to amp up the systems, right? This is different from places that don't require too much from you, right? In places that require a lot from you, you have to amp up your systems, right? So you have to be very strict with yourself, right? You have to be very strict with yourself about how you're taking care of yourself, right? In places like that you've mentioned, therapy is important. Okay, you need a space where you can talk to someone about the things that you're witnessing, the things that you're seeing, right? The things that you are interacting with. You need a place to go and talk about those things, right? So, other than the self care that you can put in place, therapy, I think, is very, very important because therapy will help you vent. Therapy will help you understand the things that you are seeing, right? And in that way, you don't feel like you're doing this alone, right? Yes, there are people around you, you're working with them, right? But it can feel lonely in the way that you're thinking, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, right? It can feel lonely. So have a therapist or someone that you talk to about specifically about the things that you're seeing, but specifically about work, right? Have a place where you can go and vent, a place where you can go and talk about your emotions, your feelings, because it's new every day, right? The experience doesn't feel the same all the time, right? There are some new things you're discovering about yourself every time you're in those places. You need a place to discuss how you're feeling about what you're witnessing. Yeah. I hope
Thank
that.
you. Yes, it helped. Thank you.
So what are actually some of the more common signs of burnout and how can people recognize it early?
Burnout is hard to recognize early, right? A lot of times you recognize that you're burnt out when it's too late, right? And that's why we tell clients, put in the systems. If you notice this place is draining you a lot, put in the systems as early as possible, right? So it's hard sometimes to recognize that you're burnt out immediately. So one of the things you can look out for is how much sleep or no sleep you're getting, right? If you feel like you're sleeping too much, or if you feel like you can't sleep, maybe you're burnt out, right? So sleep is one of them, okay? Your mood is another one. If you notice that you're being too snappy, you feel like your capacity is on E, right? It's on empty. Your capacity is on empty. You can't stand people. You can't stand being around people. You can't stand talking to people, right? When you notice that, maybe you're burnt out, right? Or if you notice that you just want to isolate, every time you're free, you just want to isolate, maybe you're burnt out. Okay? Burnout is just your nervous system saying, I can't do this anymore, right? That's just your nervous system saying that. And your nervous system responds different. It's different for everyone. Okay. But when you notice that you're just not yourself, maybe you should ask yourself, am I burnt out? Right? So one of three things you can look out for: your sleep or lack thereof, right? Your mood, right? And your capacity. Okay. If your capacity begins to dwindle, every single day your capacity is dwindling, you feel like you just can't stand existing, maybe you're burnt out.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it's of course very concerning to hear, but unfortunately it seems to not be so uncommon. So it's quite important that we are equipped with understanding those signs. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? So, what advice would you give to someone who feels guilty about taking time off for self-care or relaxation?
Yeah, I know. I mean, okay, so I think rest comes with guilt, mostly for women, because women have been taught that you have to earn your rest, right? I've not seen this problem with um, a lot of men more than I've seen it with women. So when you notice that resting is feeling like I'm resting and feeling guilty, be okay with that, right? Be okay with feeling guilty and not letting the guilt change your mind about the rest, right? Allow yourself, okay? I always use this word, allow yourself to feel guilty. Guilty doesn't always equal I'm doing a bad thing, right? Guilt just feels like, and guilt is a very surface level emotion. When you dig deeper, you notice why you're feeling guilty, right? It's a very, very surface level emotion. Okay. When you pull back that thread, you'll notice, why is it I'm feeling guilty? Is it because I feel like if I'm not productive, then I'm lazy? Is it that when I'm not doing something, that it means that I I, I can't even earn the rest? Does it feel like I have to do so much so that I can rest? Peel it back, and then you ask yourself, okay, if that's a thought, where does it come from? So guilt is a surface level emotion, and when you notice that it's surface level, you understand that there's something deeper going on. Okay, and maybe I need to address that, right? Address it. Allow yourself to address it. Okay. So you don't let the guilt take away from you resting. You don't let the guilt tell you, now I can't rest because I feel guilty. Now I need to do something. I need to wash the dishes. I need to now clean my room. I need to now clean the house. No, rest. Allow yourself. Okay. Even if it's just for one day, give yourself that, right? Allow yourself to rest, even if it's just for one day, and feel the guilt. Okay. But you have to address that guilt. You have to address it, right? When you address it, then it goes away, right? Address the guilt, okay? But don't let the guilt tell you that you shouldn't rest.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Would anyone like to ask another question on this topic before I move on? So next, we're going to be talking about narcissistic personality disorder, another buzzword lately. I just wanted to begin by saying that, this is really it's a personality disorder, so it's a term that shouldn't be used lightly. At the same time, there are times when you run into someone who may have this personality disorder or may have traits of a narcissist. And it can happen in your work environment. And it's important to learn tools of how to effectively deal with them. And also to understand if maybe you yourself have some narcissistic traits. So I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that people might have or experiences about dealing with someone who may have narcissistic personality disorder or some traits that you felt were narcissistic. So then I'll just start by asking, how can someone identify narcissistic behavior in the workplace, whether it's in themselves or in their colleagues?
Okay. I actually have been observing this for quite some time. So I have some notes that I took down. So I'll share those notes with you. So one of the things to look out for is someone that lacks empathy, right? So whenever you talk about how you're feeling, or when you talk about your ideas, or when you talk about you know any input that you put in, right? When you talk about these things, they treat you like you're less than, right? They treat you like you don't know what you're talking about, right? So someone that lacks empathy, someone that doesn't feel like they see you, right? Someone that feels like they treat you like you are less than, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're young, or you have nothing to bring to the table, even though you're there, right? So you look out for someone who doesn't have empathy. Okay. So another thing is to look out for someone who takes credit when it's not due, right? So they take credit for your work, they take credit for other people's work, and then when things don't go right, they shift blame, right, to other people. They don't take the blame like they took the credit, right? So they make it seem like they're the ones doing all the work, they're the ones coming up with the good ideas, they're the ones pushing the agenda forward, right? They're the ones doing all the good things. But then when it comes to when something goes wrong, they don't want to take ownership, right? And they blame other people, right? Those are two very important things that are telltale signs for someone who's narcissistic, right? Another one, another one is they make you feel like, if it's not for them, you wouldn't have the job, right? They make you feel like if it's not for them, then your position is at risk. They make you feel like if you don't go for them for support, if you don't go to them for support, then you're screwed, right? So you'll notice that every time you interact with them, you're questioning your worth, you're questioning your identity at work, right? You're questioning your sanity, right? You feel like you question yourself. Interactions with a narcissist often make you question yourself. They make you question how you're feeling, because they will gaslight you, right? They make you question your thoughts, they make you question your emotions, right? So every interaction with them feels like you didn't really gain anything there. In fact, you feel like you're giving them more than they're pouring into you, right? This is because at work you're not interacting with new beings. Like, people don't come into work and then they're a new being. If a narcissist is a narcissist at home, they're going to be a narcissist at work, right? So this person feels like they're just draining. Interactions with them are draining. Sometimes even it doesn't even have to do with work. Any interaction with them feels like it feels like it's all about them, right? And nothing about you. You don't feel like you get a word in edgewise, right? You don't feel like, you can speak up about how you feel and the things that you're thinking about, or, your ideas. You don't feel like you can speak up, right? Because it doesn't feel like a safe environment. Okay. And then another thing to look out for is narcissists often have outbursts that feel so explosive, right? So if someone is embarrassing you in public, they are, reading you for feel in public, right? They are talking down at you, right? Just to talk down at you, right? In public, right? Or even in private, right? If in private you feel like, oh, this person really just like made me feel like a piece of shit, right? In public or in private, they have outbursts and they embarrass you, right? And they do this so that they can look like they're powerful, right? But power doesn't come with being a dictator. It comes with leadership and healthy leadership, right? So if someone is treating you like you are not worth it, then maybe they're a narcissist. It's hard to identify a narcissist in the beginning because they make you feel like they need you, right? But really, they are identifying what it is they can use, right? They're just identifying, what can I use? What can I suck out of this person, right? But in their interactions with you in the beginning, you feel like, oh, they're interested in me, they're interested in understanding me, right? But they're really just getting data. So sometimes it's hard to identify in the beginning, right? But the more you interact with them, the more you realize every interaction feels draining. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's it's a little bit scary to consider. So on that point, like, how can people effectively try to deal with someone who might be narcissistic or narcissistic behavior in a workplace?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first thing to understand is you need to remind yourself that you don't need to stay there to prove a point. Okay? You don't need to stay in an environment with a narcissist just to prove a point. You have to understand what your capacity is, right? What is my capacity? Because you can look for information on how to deal with a narcissist, implement that information, but also remember what your capacity is, right? So you don't need to stay there just to prove a point to anyone or even to yourself, right? So remember that you are not going to stay in a place long enough to see your mental health dwindle, right? Remember that, okay? So it is not an end-all be-all situation, okay? You have to be willing to walk away at some point, right? So that's one of the things to put in place, okay? And then some of the things to put in place is, when you know that this is a person that is a narcissist, right? Keep data, right? Record, have concrete proof about your work, about your output, right? About how you've interacted with them. Okay. Have proof, record it, right? Make sure that if someone was to ever question you, you have receipts, right? You have your receipt, okay? So that's another thing to put in place. Also limit your engagement, right? You don't need to interact with them all the time. Do it as necessary if you need and when you need to interact with them, right? Another thing to remember is to always remain professional. Okay, so this is not someone to be friends with. This is not someone to explore a friendship with, right? Remain professional as much as possible. Okay, and then remain calm. Don't match their energy. You don't need to match their energy, right? Because that can also be used against you. Okay, so you don't need to match anyone's energy. Remain calm. Allow yourself to remain calm. Okay, and then do your job. Just do your job and go home, right? Do your job as best as possible and go home. Don't give them something to talk about or something to use against you. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any questions on the topic before I move on?
I do. I want to know, is it possible for you to, if you meet someone with narcissistic personality disorder in the workplace, is it possible for you to be friends with them, actually engage them like positively and make, I guess, a good thing out of the relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. It's possible. But you have to have the knowledge that this person is a narcissist, because if you don't, it can, it might not end well for you, right? You have to have the knowledge. So just know I'm interacting with a narcissist. Okay. So go in knowing that, right? And then pick and choose what it is you feel like you can learn from them. They're not okay. So narcissists are not all bad. It is a personality disorder, but it's a personality disorder that can quickly become an abusive, relationship, right? This personality disorder can be, can be used to manipulate, right? It's used actually to manipulate, right? So it can quickly become abusive. So if you're going in not knowing what you're dealing with, that can be dangerous, right? So know first what it is you're dealing with. Okay. Then once you're in there, pick and choose what it is you feel like you can learn from them. Narcissistic people seem very confident, right? They seem very stoic, right? So you can learn a few things about, confidence, about stoicism, about standing up for yourself, right? You can learn a few things like that, right? It's very hard to be friends with a narcissist, because you never know how they might treat you at some point, right? You never know. So, you know, you don't have to go in with the notion that I want to be friends with this person. Figure out if you can actually explore friendship, right? Figure out after, spending time with them for a long period of time. I always tell my clients 6 months is the minimum that you need to understand a person, right? 6 months to a year. So spend time around these people, okay? Spend time with them, see how you feel after your interactions with them, right? And then you'll be able to know if you can explore friendship with them. I hope that answers.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Then, without any further questions, I'll move on to the next topic. So we've spoken a lot about self-esteem, but I wanted to dig deeper into the topic, discussing self-esteem and the connection with emotional well-being. So I really want to discuss here how A positive self-image, emotional resilience, and mental health can enhance performance, decision-making, and even workplace relationships, ultimately leading to a more satisfactory work experience and even career growth. So, my first question on that is, how does self-esteem influence an individual's performance and possible career outlook?
Mm. Self-esteem plays a very big role. It plays a very big role because it's tied to how you feel about your ability, right? It's tied to how you feel about your worth, right? So it plays a very, very big role. Okay. There's someone who asked earlier how to navigate being in the working force for the first time. Sometimes your self-esteem can take a hit, right? It doesn't mean that it should stay that way, right? It just means that you need to identify why it is you feel like your self-esteem has taken a hit. Sometimes you just feel intimidated, right? So your self-esteem does play a big role, and it's important to figure out why you are feeling like you're having low self-esteem at the workplace, right? So is it that you feel like you're not worthy of the role? Is it that you feel like, this role is too big and I don't know if I can do it? Is it that you feel imposter syndrome, right? Whatever it is, figure it out, right? Because your confidence is important at the workplace. It really is. There's no two ways about it, right? Sometimes you can have the confidence, sometimes you can fake it, right? So it does play a big role, and it's something that can really take away from your experience, right? It can take away from your working experience. And that's why I always emphasize to have a work-life balance. So don't make your work your everything, because that's a very temporary thing to tie to your self-esteem, right? So one day, if you're given a bad review, now you feel like you're not competent, right? So have a work-life balance. Understand that your work is not your everything, right? And have an amazing life outside of work. Build your life outside of work, a place that you feel like is amazing, a place that you feel like you love going to, right? Build that so that you are differentiating your life at work and your life outside of work, right? That's going to help build your confidence in knowing that I have something outside of work, right? I don't need to tie my worth to my job, right? So that's a really good place to be keen on, because when you live student life and then you come into the workforce, it's so easy to tie your identity to your work, right? Because it's a place that you feel like you're proving yourself, and it's so easy to feel like when you're complimented, you feel good, right? When you are given a bad review, you feel bad, right? And then you make that your identity, right? So you make either feeling good your identity or feeling bad your identity, right? But you have to differentiate. This is just at the workplace, right? And at the workplace, I'm learning and I'm growing. So I can't tie that to my worth. I can't tie that to my self-esteem. Your self-esteem should be tied to your ability. So do I have the ability to figure things out, right? Do I have the ability to learn new things, right? Do I have the ability to keep showing up, right? For myself and for the job, right? Tie your self-esteem to things that can't change. Yeah.
I love that. Also, it's like taking a sense of power back from,
Yes.
looking for that validation from within yourself rather than external. And I think that's very powerful. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask on the topic?
How does someone with like mental health issues deal with being in like a very stressful workplace? Because I find that like you're more susceptible to that high level of stress. So when we talk about systems, what sort of systems exist for someone who has pre-established conditions?
Therapy. Therapy is so important. I think having a place where you can talk about your emotions and your feelings, whilst navigating work, so important, especially if you do have these pre-existing conditions, right? So therapy is a great tool. And I'm not just saying that just because I'm a therapist. It's so important. It allows you to feel like a person, right? Outside of work. Okay. So therapy, I would say therapy. Also medication at some point, right? Discuss that with your therapist if that's something that you need for you to be able to navigate, right? Medication sometimes can go a long way, right? Systems that you can put in place, like in your personal life, outside of therapy, outside of medication, a system that you can put in place is checking in with yourself, right? Consistently checking in with yourself, right? At the end of a workday, check in with yourself, okay? Look at how you're feeling, look at how you're faring on over a period of time, right? And then it's also important to feel aligned. It's important to feel aligned at the workplace. Whether or not you even have mental health issues, it's important to feel aligned, right? If you're feeling aligned, your mental health improves over time. If you're feeling misaligned, your mental health will be challenged, right? And when you already have existing conditions, when it's challenged, it will be hard, right? So remember, know when to walk away, okay? Know when to walk away, especially if it's a highly stressful environment. Know when to walk away. And if you don't know when to walk away, talk to someone about it, right? Talk to someone about it, because sometimes it might feel like a failure. It might feel like did I fail just because I feel like I want to walk away, right? Talk to someone about it, right? And decipher when the time is right for you to walk away.
But what if you don't necessarily have access to services like therapy? I mean, I know we can like check in with ourselves, but that can be really difficult, especially when mental health is something that could be really new to you and your community, your family, spaces that you grow up in.
Okay. Sometimes therapy is not accessible. Maybe because it's expensive, right? But I think you can, look for cheaper options therapy-wise, right? In my country, we have lists of free therapy services, places that offer free therapy services, right? So sometimes it's because of money, sometimes it's because you're not in an environment that can allow you to access therapy, right? So in those environments, you're not really left with much to work with. So you are only left with the people around you to talk to, right? People sometimes are very, very helpful. It can feel like you're dumping on them, but if this is something that if you don't have therapy and this is all you have, you can ask people, do you have the capacity for me to talk to you right now? Right? And don't allow yourself to sink into shame around needing to talk to people all the time. Utilize the people that are around you, right? Have a support system around you, right? Have a support system that you feel like you can talk to, okay? A support system that you feel like you can lean on, right? Also, inquire at your workplace if they have mental health support. If they do, utilize that. If they don't, then look for things outside of yourself, right? And if you have mental health, if your mental health really plays a big role, like you have mental health issues, it's important to look at what has worked for you in the past, right? When you are in stressful situations, what worked for you to help you in a healthy way, right? Look back on those things and try to implement them. Okay. Also, be patient with yourself. Be very patient with yourself, right? Navigating mental health issues and an environment that isn't supporting your mental health is very, very stressful. So you have to be very, very patient with yourself. If you're having rotting days and you are feeling guilty, be patient with yourself, right? Be kind to yourself. You are going through something very, very stressful and you're just living life for the first time. You don't have like, pre-existing times where you already did this and you have now that practice to pull from. No, you are living life for the first time. So be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself, right? Allow yourself to figure it out slowly by slowly, you know. And then look for a way to access therapy, right? Look for a way to access therapy whilst you are putting in this system, right? Because ultimately, a therapist will help you more than the people around you can. A professional will help you more than the people around you can. Okay. I hope I answered. If you have a follow-up, please ask.
No, I think that's pretty clear. Thank you.
Great. And, we spoke a lot about people who are employees, but I just want to raise the question about people who may be in a leadership position. How can they foster an environment where mental health is taken seriously? And what role does creating constructive criticism have in that?
Constructive criticism in what sense?
Right. So having, like different styles of criticizing, so there's many types of criticism that can be really degrading, and there's criticism which can be just purely helpful and necessary.
Okay. So for people in leadership, I recommend for them to look for industrial psychologists to help them understand how to be a good leader at the workplace, right? Industrial psychologists really help set up like systems and protocols that help, right, with employees and their employer relationship, right? So that's one of the things I recommend to the people in leadership. Put in the help that you need, right? Both for yourself and for your employees, right? Now, when it comes to criticism, I think it's important. Your role as a leader is to understand the people you're leading, right? You have to understand the people you're leading. You have to understand what kind of language does this person understand? What kind of language does this person understand, right? And when I say language, I don't mean like English or, I mean how to speak to this person in a way that they will feel seen, right? Versus speaking to them in a way that feels degrading, right? Learn your people, learn the people that you're leading, learn them slowly by slowly, right? And don't feel like you need to assert your dominance for you to be a good leader, right? Understand that leadership takes time, right? Understanding your people takes time, okay? And leadership is not domineering. Leadership is much like being a shepherd, right? You have to lead your sheep and be patient with them, right? And allow them to, make mistakes, correct their mistakes in a way that feels like you're helping them grow, right? And you can only do that by spending time with them and understanding what kind of language works for them. Yeah.
Thank you. That was helpful. Do we have any more questions on this topic? If not, I'll move to general questions and answers where you guys can ask all your burning questions that maybe the topics themselves didn't cover. Okay, then. Okay, so I'll open up the floor. If there's anything that you feel like you didn't get to ask, which you would like to know, you can feel free to ask that. Of course, trying to stay relevant to the topic of work-life balance, mental health at work.
I have a question. If there is an in-house therapist, or someone you can go to for mental health needs in-house at a workplace, how do you navigate feeling like you can actually speak to this person openly and that they will, make sure in that moment that they're there for you and they're not here only as a part of the actual establishment or the company you might be working for, and that you can trust that you can unload or offload to them whatever you need to talk about?
It's a good question. So the only way you can know is by finding out, right? It's by actually going. But I think one of the things to speak up about in a session is to say, I feel like I don't know how to feel safe in this session because I don't know if what we talk about will remain in this session. Speak up about that, right? Speak up about that and see the vibe that you're getting back. Okay. I think also understand your work environment. So is this a work environment that uses people's things against them, right? Are you using what I said maybe in a meeting or in passing? Do you use that against me, right? Then maybe maybe not to trust the therapist that they've put in place, right? But if there's none of that, the only way you can find out is by going for a session, right? And once you're there, talk about how you feel regarding safety, right? And then see the vibe that you're getting back. If the vibe makes you feel safe, open up a little bit, right? You don't need to say everything. Right? Open up a little bit and then see if that's used against you at some point. If it's not, then this is a safe place, right? So first you look at your work environment, your culture. Is it a place that they use things against people? If they do, look for a therapist outside, right? If they don't, try the therapist, right? Once you get there, speak up about how you feel regarding safety, and then open up a little bit, right? And then see the feedback that you get from that.
Thank you, Mumbi.
Does anyone else want to raise a question? I would ask, in your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions about mental health in the workplace?
That it's not important, that it doesn't play a big role, right? That's one of the biggest misconceptions. Your mental health plays a big role because it determines your output, right? If you're feeling shitty every day at work, your output might not be the best. So your mental health matters. It matters the most. It matters the most. If it's not the most important thing, it's maybe the second most important thing. Okay? So your mental health matters. Yeah.
And one more question, just because we spoke a lot about high pressure work environments and toxic work environments, but
Mhm.
maybe we can talk about what do you think might be the line where you say, okay, this has crossed from stressful to toxic?
Mm. Hmm. When, okay, so you draw the line when you feel like nothing is changing, right? When nothing is changing, that's when you draw the line. And the line here is whether or not you want to stay. Okay. So, in as much as quitting is not always the first option, especially in this economy, right? It also shouldn't be that you will never quit, even if it's toxic, right? So the line here is whether or not you're willing to stay. Okay. If things are not changing, reconsider whether or not you want to stay. So that's really the line when things are changing or when things aren't changing.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, general questions that they want to ask?
I have one last question. So we've talked about sort of like the workplace and how we can identify like bad things and things that we don't want. But how can we identify like what is a good characteristic in a workplace that we're trying to maybe get into, especially if you are diagnosed with some sort of mental illness?
Okay, so green flags. One, it's not making your mental health worse. Okay, that's a green flag. You feel like you're learning something. Okay, you're learning something new. You're learning things that make you feel, challenged, like you're growing, right? Another thing to look out for is the culture. The culture makes you feel safe, right? It makes you feel like you can actually go to work and not feel like you're dreading it, right? The culture is important. Also, support, right? Do they have support? Whether it's mental health related or just work related, do they offer willingly and openly? Do they offer support? Okay. And another thing to look out for is how much they stress on, rest, sleep days. Do they allow that for you? Can you even be allowed to take a mental health day, right? I know that's rare, right? But if it's rare, then leave days. Are you being like, are they in a space where they can actually push you to take your leave days if you're not taking your leave days, right? If they're just allowing you to work and work and work and work, that's not a good place to put yourself in, right? So I think it ties to support. Do they support you, right? Do you feel supported, right? Allow yourself to understand that if this is a place that doesn't make me feel supported, then it might not end well for me in the long run, right? But if it makes me feel supported, then maybe I can allow myself to go there and see how my mental health responds, right? If it responds negatively, figure out why that is, right? Is it because it's new? Is it because it's challenging? Is it because is it because it's actually toxic, right? So decipher that, right? And I'll be patient. Again, be patient with yourself. Be very, very patient with yourself. Okay. But those are the green flags I would say to look out for.
Thank you.
Does
Welcome.
anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask? Okay, then, if not, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And if you're interested in seeking out therapy, group therapy, or individual therapy, please reach out to Mumbi. She is amazing. As you guys can see, she's very knowledgeable about a lot of work-related issues, general anxiety, which is unfortunately pretty common these days. So you can find her on any of these platforms. Here's her email, her phone number, and also her website. I'll give you guys a minute to just jot that down, but I'll also post it on LinkedIn, and we'll also post it on our social media platforms for you guys to be able to access her.